back in Europe or over in Europe, if you are, going to university and you're an athlete, well, you're on your own. And to balance both things is really hard. So, here everything is scheduled for you. You can do both very easily.
All right, today on the Spotlight, we are joined by Patrick Hanauer, the founder of Sport and Study USA. Welcome.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Up to this point, a lot of our conversations have been with coaches, but you serve athletes in a little bit different way, and you've helped a lot of athletes come to the United States. And I know that you've impacted a lot of collegiate triathlon rosters with the work that you've done. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yes. So our agency, basically, we are the middleman between the college coaches and the athletes. Most of our athletes are foreign. So we help them with the entire process. Obviously, we find them the spots on the teams. We find them the scholarships. We help them make, college as affordable as possible. But we also help, with all the administrative steps, the visa, the NCAA clearinghouse, every step of the way we are there to help them.
What have you found with the athletes that you've supported has been some of the biggest hurdles that you've helped them overcome?
So I've been doing this for a long time. So, to tell you all the hurdles or all the obstacles would probably take too long, but just to give you maybe a couple. Language barrier can be an obstacle, depending on where the kids are from. They haven't had to learn English for very long in high school. So the SAT can be difficult. Even the TOEFL or Duolingo can be an obstacle. So language is probably one thing. The other thing is, since most foreign kids don't know how the process works, they just start too late. And, the process, it can be rushed. It can be done in, 9 months, 12 months. But the earlier you start, the more options you'll have. And, the better your options will be. So starting early. And, I get a lot of calls from kids that call me in, March, April for the same year. And then, then it's challenging to still get them something decent, to get the whole process done in 4 or 5 months.
A lot of the European nations, a student would have access to a free college education. What would motivate one of your clients to come to the United States, and even after athletic scholarships, still have a net cost of attendance and still, have some money out of pocket that they're responsible for? Why are you seeing those athletes want to come to the United States?
I think that's the athletic component. Obviously, back in Europe or over in Europe, if you are, going to university and you're an athlete, well, you're on your own. And to balance both things is really hard. So, here everything is scheduled for you. You can do both very easily. So the athletic component is one thing. Then you have the education component as well. Here you have some top universities where you get a top-notch degree as well. And the third thing is probably the experience, studying abroad, learning a different language, and just, seeing a different part of the world. I think those are the three main things why a lot of athletes come over to the States.
It's interesting. I've traveled over the years, and so I have some insights into how that can really impact and shape a young person.
Yeah.
And I've had the experience on the other side of it too as a coach, bringing international athletes into my roster. And I really enjoy having different lived experiences kind of add some layers to the roster. Is there a sort of a profile of an athlete that you've worked with that seems to really thrive when they travel abroad and compete in the United States?
I think it does help if you are an outgoing personality, just because, and I tell this story to everyone. So when I came to the States, my English wasn't great. And what did I do? I wasn't scared of, making any mistakes. So I just started speaking to everyone. And once you're in the US, within 2 weeks, no matter how bad your English is, you'll speak it pretty good, just because you're forced to speak it, on a daily basis. So I think the people that struggle maybe a little bit are the people that are maybe a bit introverted, that, lock themselves in their room. They don't try to socialize with Americans. And then, most of the time, those kids get a bit homesick at the beginning. It doesn't mean that it doesn't, solve itself, over time. They just take a bit longer than someone who just starts speaking and goes out and meets people from the first day on.
That definitely resonates. I can think about some of the athletes I've worked with, and that certainly has resonated in both directions. Athletes that have
Mhm.
struggled, and those that have really thrived. Have you seen any changes in the approach of some of your prospective student athletes post COVID or through this global pandemic? Has the search process shifted for you, or has that impacted the work you do in any way?
To be honest, not that much. The only thing that I've obviously seen, I do more Zoom calls. I mean, that's like everyone, it's everything is more on camera than in person. But to be honest, no, I think it has even gotten, if anything, more competitive. I think even more kids, maybe because there was a bit of hesitance, during COVID to come. A lot of kids maybe, waited for a year and then came afterwards. So I think it has gotten more competitive, if anything. But other than that, I think, the kids are still coming. They're still wanting to do the same thing than before. So I don't see much of a difference, to be honest.
I would imagine there's a pretty lengthy process of getting to know the client that you're working with, getting to know that family, what their expectations and objectives are, and matching them with a campus, with a coach, with a program.
Mhm.
Can you give a little bit of an overview of what that process is like?
Yeah, so the first step in the process, no matter how good the athlete is or what their background is, I do a free consultation. And that also helps me to see if I can even help them. If, for example, the expectations of the athlete are, I need to go to an I or the parents. The parents are mostly the ones that are maybe a bit more problematic than the athlete themselves. But for example, if the parents expect their kid to go to Stanford or an Ivy League and the kid has a 2.8 GPA, I always tell them, I'm not a magician. I can help, I can facilitate, but I cannot put you in Ivy League if your GPA doesn't qualify you. So that's why I always do this first initial phone call, without any commitment and no fee. They don't have to pay me for that. And there I clearly, mention to them what I think is possible, what we need to do to get from point A to point B. And then, I answer all their questions. And only after that call is when we decide if we work together. So that's a very important and very crucial first step in the process.
You and I have talked a lot over the last few years, just in terms of some of my own recruiting process, trying to find some athletes. And it's always felt very, very natural and productive, but I don't necessarily know why. I don't have any insights into that. We just have a pretty good manner in how we talk, and I've always found good athletes amongst your roster of athletes that you're working with. What are the coaches who are having the most success, who are finding your service the most useful, doing specifically to facilitate this process, or is there a type of program that you're looking for that you just really connect with? Is there some organic reason why one type of coach or program works better with your service than another?
Yeah, I think what really helps is being straight up, me with you, you with me, and talking about what you expect from an athlete and then, what you need from them. Same thing what I just mentioned, with parents that want their kids to go to Ivy Leagues. When I have a call with a coach, it's probably good, when we talk about a certain athlete, to talk about your expectations, what you need of the kids to get them into the school academically, to have all those things ready for me, because there is thousands of schools in the US. It's impossible for me to know every single TOEFL score that's required by a school, for example. So, when the coaches have that information handy, and that's what they tell me immediately when we start talking about an athlete, that speeds up the process and also helps me not waste your time, because if we spend 3 months working on a kid and then the kid doesn't have the academics to get into the school, I've wasted your time, you've wasted your own time, so it doesn't help anyone.
That makes sense. Yeah, for sure. And those are the types of conversations that we had, certainly with some of the athletes that we've worked on together. Triathlon is definitely our focus here with this channel, and that's been the core of the work you and I have done together. How are you seeing that grow and emerge in your business? Are there more and more candidates in the triathlon space? Are you having to cultivate that, or what's been happening with that in recent years?
Yeah, so if I look back, 7, 8 years, no triathlon kids around the world knew that college triathlon even existed. And now we're getting applications. I have, kids reaching out to me to do college triathlon because, the word has spread a little bit, so people know about it. But it's still, compared to other sports, it's still an option where we need to be a lot more proactive and go after the kids. When it comes to college golf, college tennis, even college soccer now, all the kids that, that are 16, 17, they know that they want to come to America to play college golf, college tennis. So it's not something that's so new. And they're also more familiar with the process compared to, triathlon kids where maybe, once they turn 17, 18, all of a sudden they hear it somewhere and then they try to rush the process. But it has definitely gotten a lot more popular, a lot more common over the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years.
I know you have strong ties to the region of Belgium and Germany. Is that your pipeline, or are you kind of casting a wider net even than that?
Yeah, I try to be a bit more wide than that, just because I speak a lot of languages, and that's, like I said at the beginning, the language barrier. Not so much with the kids, but very often with the parents. If they don't speak the same language, it can be a bit tricky. So I've also tried to expand into France, into the German-speaking countries like Austria, Switzerland, and then countries that I think are always or have always been interesting for me are the Scandinavian countries, just because they speak perfect English. They know about the US as an option. And the numbers of Scandinavians in the US are, for how small the countries are population-wise, is fairly high. So those, I would say, are the countries that I've worked the most with. But, I've had athletes from all over, also Asia, some African countries, and basically all over Europe. Yeah.
Are there any regions right now that have kind of yet to emerge that you're excited about?
Depends on the sports. I mean, if we talk about triathlon, probably plenty. But for example, South America, I see a lot of South Americans in tennis and soccer, but not in other sports. Then obviously, Africa, it obviously comes down to money. Usually your countries where that are struggling a bit financially, because there is a lot, even if you have a full scholarship, there is still costs involved, where you need to obviously pay for your SAT, pay for your visa, pay for your flights. That adds up. So the countries where the kids are struggling financially are usually the ones where less kids come to America.
Yeah, I would imagine that just shifts in currency valuations probably impacts the work that you do quite a bit.
Yeah, that too. I mean, you take Argentina; they were doing pretty well, let's say, 7, 8 years ago, and then the currency, got worse and worse, and now, let's say $10,000 for an Argentinian person is obviously a totally different amount than what it was, 7, 8 years ago. So yeah, that makes a huge difference.
There was one particular country, the valuation of their currency was so volatile that from month to month, it was shifting multiple percentage points the cost of attendance to the point where the family was trying to prepay and just stabilize. And so that's a real concern with internationals. And I don't know how many coaches really even consider that in the process.
Yeah, not many. Not many. Mm-hmm.
Well, in terms of making sure that athletes, when they arrive, are successful, being mindful of cultural differences, something as simple as language or food seems pretty obvious. But are there other things that coaches can do to help facilitate a successful transition for one of your international student athletes so that they are retained for 4 years and that they see the process through to graduation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the main thing is getting used to the school system here. Because some countries, I take Belgium for example, we do the entire semester of classes, and then we have one big final exam at the end that basically counts for the entire school year. In America, you have small quizzes, small tests, you have papers that you need to turn in. And those all count into your towards your final grade. So what I tell kids in America, you just need to stay on the ball. You need to do all those small assignments, because once you fall behind, you are usually in trouble. That's when kids have issues. So I think that's something that I think coaches, in the first week, once the kids get on campus, that they can tell them. And then usually, if a kid is not lazy, they can get by pretty easily, even if the language is an issue. Also, the second thing that's also important is professors in the US are always very helpful. So if they see that you are making an effort and you are trying, they'll help you out. Again, if English is maybe an issue, they will help you out and give you some pointers of what you can do to succeed. And that's also something in Europe. Before coming to the US, I went to university for a year, and there's no help there. The professors, they teach the class, and you want to speak to them afterwards, well, good luck. They're not going to help you. So that's a big difference. And sometimes, coming from abroad, you don't know that the help is there, and you are maybe afraid to ask. But in the US, professors are there to help. And those two things, I think, if you are willing to do all the work that you're supposed to, and you're not afraid to ask for help, you'll be fine.
That's an interesting insight, and I think one that probably would be taken for granted by an American student, because it's
Yeah.
sort of the experience they'd had coming up through the high school ranks, a very similar approach. So that's an interesting thing to make sure that coaches are enlightening their international student athletes about, and making sure that they're supporting them. Do you have an ongoing relationship with the athlete once you've placed them, or is it just on to the next? I'm sure you every year have a new crop of athletes looking for homes. That must be pretty challenging, but at the same time, you probably have some kind of follow up to your relationship with athletes as well. What's that like?
Yeah, so I stay in touch with my athletes. That's actually also part of my service, and there's no additional charge for that. But if the athletes have an issue once in the US, they can call me and I help them out. Because and this, you have been coaching obviously for quite some time, but a kid can show up at a place and everything looked great on paper, and then something just doesn't seem right. They don't like the place, or I mean, not in your case, because I know all your athletes loved you, but it can happen that an athlete shows up on campus and the coach seemed great over the phone, but they just don't get along. And then obviously, the best solution most of the time is a transfer. So I help with that. If a transfer needs to happen, I help them, with a transfer free of charge. And even smaller things, sometimes you show up and they put you in a room with a roommate and you guys don't get along, but you're afraid to tell your coach because it's maybe someone else from the team. So then I try to, intervene and help out. So yeah, I help my athletes, all the way up until they graduate, sometimes even after, if they're looking, for internships and stuff. But yeah, so I'm always there to help. Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic. I know that the process through freshman year, that's the critical piece, right? If you can help them to find success in that freshman year, then that's the greatest barrier for a lot of our student athletes, whether they're international or domestic.
Yeah, for sure. And then also, I mean, I get the calls a lot, and it's normal. It's natural. You come from a foreign country, you get to the US, it's normal to get homesick, in the first 3 or 4 weeks. So I get a lot of calls, and then I tell them, hey, stick it out there for another 3-4 weeks. If things don't get better, then we can talk again. And then usually the problems take care of themselves. But that's an advice I can give to everyone. It's hard at the beginning. Just give it a bit of time. Try to get sometimes even through that first semester, and then usually once you have your friends, you know how to get your way around. Everything is smooth and sailing.
Fantastic. Well, some great stuff. Sports and Study USA, Patrick Hanauer, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Hey, thank you for having me, and speak again soon.
Absolutely.
All right. Have a good one. Bye-bye.